Greetings, colleagues and friends. Cambria Evans here, the teaching and learning EMDR consultant. Y'all, it is so good to be back with you on the video podcast. I've been missing connecting with you this way. Like many of you, I got COVID over the winter and then got a flu, and just everyone's been sick and it's been hard. So it's good to be back with you feeling healthy. Sun's coming out for spring, and just kind of navigating through this very weird time with all of you the past couple years. So we'll keep figuring it out. But I'm excited to come back on the video podcast because I have a really incredible interview today. It felt more like talking with an old friend, but I got to sit down with Mara Tesler-Stein in Israel. And she is somebody who is not just an expert on perinatal and EMDR and so many other content areas, but she's someone who I think is really a thought leader in the EMDR community around this question of, can you do EMDR with someone who is pregnant? And I might just have a series at this point in 2022 called All the Ways I Was Wrong, because I love, like all of you, I love lifelong learning. I love to see how and when I was given information that was wrong and how that information now changes as I get new information. Because it's the same process that we do with our EMDR clients, isn't it, right? They come in with some kind of narrative about themselves or the world based on some kind of traumatic experience or relationship. They come in with this old learning and they get to literally shift in front of your eyes, right, with this new learning. And this is the process here on the podcast of challenging old beliefs, challenging, old learning, and thinking with a clinical reasoning brain about why we are holding on to an answer. And it's a beautiful process to watch this unfold with clients and clinicians and consultations. So I hope you enjoy this conversation I got to have with Mara about this question I see and hear all the time in consultation of, can you do EMDR when someone is pregnant? Enjoy. So today I am so excited and so honored to get to hang out with someone that we have all seen post great information on every EMDR Facebook group. She really is someone that I respect as a thought leader in EMDR, as a fellow twin mom, and somebody who I think is really on a mission to help us get clear about what is true and not true when it comes to EMDR and pregnancy. So I want to welcome to the podcast our third international guest coming from Israel. We have Mara Tesler-Stein joining us today. Thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure. It's so great to meet you. I'm really excited to talk to you too.
Me too. I feel like I know you. I've been watching you post in the Facebook groups, and I'm always just really impressed with your answer, because I get the sense that you have this value to help people understand not just the answer, but the why. So yes. I hope anyone listening today feels like they can come away with the why and that it feels like it's kind of dropped in for them. But before we dive into all the incredible content we're going to get to, do you want to let folks know kind of like who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. Absolutely. So I am a clinical psychologist and a PMHC, which is a certification in perinatal mental health. I am based right now in the Judean Hills, just outside of Jerusalem, and also in Chicago. And I have been doing EMDR since 2003. Can I speak? I can't speak. Languages.
It's nighttime where you are, by the way.
It is.
Yeah, you're doing great.
It is. Anyway, I've been doing EMDR since 2003. And I've been interested in trauma for as long as I can remember. So even in my initial clinical training, and I'm trained initially as a child and adolescent psychologist, that's where I started. Okay. So I'm really a developmentalist at heart and an attachment-focused therapist at heart. Everything I do is relational. That's just how it is. And I really believe, and I know from my experience, that everything is better when you start with a relationship. And it's the cornerstone really of all good healthcare.
Well, I hear you and I agree with you. And I feel it even just talking with you through the screen, like this is who you are. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad it comes through because, it is hard over screen. But I was always the person in training and in the community mental health center when a trauma would come through and everybody's overbooked, everybody's exhausted. Who would like to take this child whose house just burned down? And this was before I was trained in EMDR and really was just getting an inkling of what EMDR was. In fact, we had somebody in Chicago, Harold Lipke, who was at the VA, who came and talked to us about it probably in 1991. But there wasn't the accessibility wasn't really there. So when I embarked on my husband and I, on our journey to start a family, and it did not go the way we all imagined it will go, and went into infertility treatments and then ultimately became pregnant with my twins, and then went into preterm labor with my twins at 24 weeks of a 40-week pregnancy, and spent 6.5 weeks in the hospital, tilted backward in a bed on and off the most noxious medications you can imagine, trying to prevent the babies from being born too soon. And then they were born 10 weeks early. And then they spent 10 weeks in intensive care.
Wow.
So my world completely changed.
Yes.
I had already been interested in infancy and early childhood. I'd already been interested in attachment and parenting. So it really felt like the universe had kind of helped me line up all the pieces.
Yes.
And then here was this experience. And really, I have to say that while the medical care was outstanding, the psychological support was really spotty.
Yeah.
And there's, when the psychological support, on bed rest, on a prolonged bed rest, and in newborn intensive care, and afterwards is, yeah, this must be so hard. And then that's like all they got. It really, parents feel like either there's something really wrong with me or you're missing something.
Yes.
So I really started on this journey that took me into a lot of really incredible places. And one of the things that started to happen as I got more and more engaged in the perinatal mental health world and had to be self-taught because there was virtually nothing out there.
Really?
There were a few books here and there was nothing for parents of preemies that was emotionally focused.
Wow. Okay.
Which is how I ended up co-writing a book for parents of preemies because there was nothing. And I was part of an online parents of preemies group and everyone was like, do it.
Yes.
So it took 7 years, but we did it.
Amazing.
But seeing clients come through who'd had all kinds of perinatal trauma and see that they would get better, but then they'd it felt like a cul-de-sac. It would just kind of keep circling.
Yep.
And so I thought to myself, well, EMDR sounds ridiculous, but perhaps I should get trained in it before I decide it's actually ridiculous.
That's the path, isn't it? You hear about it and you're like, am I being punked right now? Is this
Yeah. You really think is this the flavor of the month? What is this? So this is, 2002, 2003. So I went ahead and got trained. And I'm somebody who really believes, you need to get the rules down. You need to get it and really understand it.
Yes.
Before you're going to make modifications. So I read the EMDR listserv religiously. At that point, that was all there was. You could only get trained by the Institute. It was great training. And the first client that I did full, phases 1 through 8 with was somebody who'd had a really devastating perinatal loss, was pregnant again.
Wow.
And was still having flashbacks and nightmares and was better in a lot of ways. And so we targeted the worst part and moved through the reprocessing, having done our resourcing and all the things we need to do. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, she read the book. She's just being compliant. This can't be right. It's impossible. It felt like watching ice evaporate.
Wow.
Because it moved the way we're told it's going to move.
Yes.
And moved all the way through this reprocessing. And then, we did some more work in the weeks after, finished, and then she discharged. And then I heard from her with a birth announcement. And that was it for me. I was like
I'm in. Let's do this.
I'm in. Let's do this. Let's do this. And was really seeing quite a lot of perinatal trauma.
Yes.
And so, my journey has been really complex in, I think, really rich ways. So I spent 7 years researching and writing a book with Debbie Davis, who wrote Empty Cradle, Broken Heart, Surviving the Death of Your Baby. She's a developmental psychologist and writer. I've spent just a lot of time really thinking about this experience from a wide range of experiences. Also, we interview parents all around the world. So my learning about this was also very broad. So I just kind of put my head down. I did my work for a long time. And then my kids got older. They went off to college. And I poked my head up and I looked around and I'm like, so what's up? What's going on out there? And here, there were all these ways to be more in touch in the world.
Yes.
And so I'm an extrovert, you may have noticed. And so I jumped in. And so I really just jumped in and really got excited about the integration of EMDR therapy and perinatal mental health. Got trained in 2 couples therapy models along the way because, you see perinatal mental health, you see couples.
Yes.
So, you keep hitting a wall. My way of working is, I hit a wall. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I got to go find out how to do this. So what are the ways to do this? So go get trained over here, go get trained over here. And it's integrative. It's because really the good stuff integrates.
I'm loving so many things you're saying, and I just want to name them before we keep going. Sure. I hear just your commitment to not just lifelong learning, but I hear your commitment to meaning making. And I think so many therapists can relate to that, right? In general, but especially EMDR therapists who want to work in trauma, right? You hear this from so many of our friends and colleagues that I had this experience or I had this kind of childhood, and now I want to take what happened to me, make sense of it, and make it mean something, and make sure it doesn't happen to these people or they have a different outcome. And we're driven by that, and we're inspired by that. And so I'm really just appreciating that you had this experience. You noticed what wasn't there for you that should have been there for you, right?
Yeah,
and you really just have this mission. And you've already educated so many of us. It's gracious. I know you have your trainings and your book, but just the fact that you even come into the Facebook communities and keep educating us about how to hold this is really important. And I shared with you before we kind of, started the podcast recording, but when I see a blind spot for me, whether it's personal or professional or like, I am naming and hoping to validate that I was trained with misinformation about EMDR and pregnancy. So I think that, for me to understand not just what the answer is today, but also kind of, how do we hold that, I think would help me as a clinician and also just help everyone else listening who might feel confused and scared.
Absolutely. And I want to start, I really appreciate that. I just want to start by saying that, we know that intentions are good.
Yes.
Right. That the avoidance, the saying, no, don't do it. Or, one of the things that happens is that if you really look at the question is an important question to ask.
Yes.
I think any question should be asked. What I respond to when I come into the conversation is the answers. And when the answers don't have an evidence base beneath them, what really is happening is what we call omission bias. So if you're familiar with heuristics are cognitive shortcuts and cognitive distortions that all human beings make. We all do it. It's not about being a good person or a smart person. It's what we do. It's because otherwise we'd have to be reconstructing meaning from sand every time we engage in a conversation. So heuristics are fabulous, except that sometimes those heuristics involve not just a shortcut, but a distortion. So there are some that come and some are persistent. In medicine in particular, we see omission bias. So what is omission bias? It says that taking action that might confer some risk, maybe not, but might confer some risk, is worse than inaction. Except what gets forgotten is, and what's the risk of inaction?
Yes.
But there's this idea, and some of it has to do with how we're wired as human beings. When you do something and then you get scared, or you do something and then there's a side effect or a negative result. This happens a lot with medications. Giving a medication that may have a side effect, and physicians might hold back from giving a medication that has a side effect, maybe not weighing the evidence of and what might happen if I don't get this medication. Costs and benefits. So this is what I believe is happening here with this really reflexive no around EMDR therapy, particularly reprocessing phases during pregnancy. One of the things that I see over and over again is that anybody who answers that question without really knowing the perinatal research and also not really understanding what we're doing neurobiologically and what's happening in the nervous system with EMDR, they'll answer the question in a whole variety of ways. So I've heard, can't do it in the first trimester, you shouldn't do it in the last trimester, you shouldn't do it if it's about this pregnancy, you shouldn't do it unless it's about this pregnancy. You should only do it and only do phase 2. Only do. So I'm like, well, okay. So what I say is, so why?
Yes.
Or where's the data to support that? Because if there is data to support not doing reprocessing phases in the first 12, 13 weeks of pregnancy, please show them to me, because I would like to know that. Because I will change my materials.
Yes, we'll modify as we go and learn.
Yeah, like if there's new data, I would like the new data.
Yes.
Right.
I think I have to say this. I'm remembering now. I think one of the first times I either saw in a Facebook group somebody refer to you, or maybe you were even in the thread, was when someone asked that question of like, can I do EMDR when someone's pregnant? And, I want to own, like, with my own positive intention, right? As an EMDR consultant, I'm like repeating what was told to me. And so I was like,
absolutely,
you can, but make sure you get medical sign off, and make sure, like, it was like a lot of kind of CYA language. It was like, but it could be really dangerous. And I was repeating these things without the why, without the understanding, right? And even in my basic training I shared with you, I went into this basic training 6 weeks pregnant with my IVF twins after I had an ectopic pregnancy and a miscarriage before that. So I came into this training both so excited to learn EMDR because everyone's talking about it. So excited, I'm finally pregnant, right? And it's sticking, it's working, and terrified because, I'm trying to figure out, as part of this training, I have to do EMDR in the process.
As a client.
And is that safe? And the answer I got was like, do EMDR light. And I was like, I don't know what EMDR is, first of all. I don't know what EMDR light is. I'm terrified about this pregnancy. It is high risk, right? I'm 35. It's IVF. So I didn't.
And it's twins.
Yeah, I didn't have any answers. And I kind of just went into the training and tried to kind of have some distance from my own processing, unfortunately. But I think a lot of us are told, like you said, these messages, and we just pass them down, right?
We do. We absolutely do.
With a positive intention.
Of course, with the best possible intentions. And there is very much a belief, like, if it's always easier to say no, except it's not always to the person's benefit to say no. The belief that saying no, that not acting is more correct.
Or like acting. Safer somehow, maybe?
Yes. Safer is omission bias. It's omission bias.
Yep.
Because ultimately, here's the why. We have a mountain of evidence about the impact of untreated or inadequately treated anxiety, depression, and PTSD on the pregnancy. Not just the pregnant person. I mean, that's enough, right? This human being who happens to be pregnant. But beyond that, the impact on the pregnancy and the impact on the developing baby, not just temporary, but that persists throughout childhood. So, for example, we know that untreated depression, anxiety, PTSD, we see higher rates of preterm birth. We see intrauterine growth restriction. We see not as good vagal tone
Wow,
in the developing baby. We see just low birth weight. And then at birth, and so that, I mean, there's a very long list actually, but, and then at birth, what we see in the neonate is higher rates of what they call hard crying. So that sort of tense, arching, hard to soothe kind of crying. Wow. We see these kids who are less regulated or less able to be co-regulated, because you're not born able to self-regulate. You've got to start off with co-regulation, and that's how you learn to self-regulate. Nervous system learns. And so we see higher rates of things, of just behavior problems, ADHD, cognitive impairment, like real impact from not acting. We also know that EMDR therapy is pro-parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
So it downregulates the nervous system. So even though there are these peaks, first of all, that's happening anyway for most people who are coming in for therapy.
Yeah, they're getting triggered all the time.
It's not like people aren't triggered. It's not like people aren't crying. It's not like people aren't upset. It's happening. The kind of stress, so let me sort of turn, because this is really a three-dimensional conversation. So this is already happening. So what I say to people is the thing that you're afraid of inducing by doing EMDR reprocessing is actually already happening.
Yes.
To your clients. Because when you leave them in a state of what we would call toxic stress, untreated anxiety, depression, PTSD is toxic stress. Not all stress is bad. Some stress is adaptive. And in fact, the developing baby needs exposure to some stress because it entrains the nervous system. That's how the nervous system develops shock absorbers.
Makes sense.
So we know, for example, and there's some research on what happens in terms of stress around amniocentesis. That's stressful, right? Lots of things that happen during the course of a pregnancy are stressful, including getting born. Getting born is stressful by design. So especially when a baby comes through the birth canal, it squeezes amniotic fluid out of the lungs, and the stress switches fetal circulation to newborn circulation. You need the stress. It's adaptive stress.
Wow.
Not all stress is bad. It's so purposeful. And as somebody who spent 6.5 weeks on bed rest in the hospital in preterm labor, I will tell you, steroid shots, in my case, shots, multiple shots. They don't do shots anymore. They do one set of shots. Steroid shots are given very commonly when there's a risk of very preterm birth. Yeah. Why? Because it stresses the baby and it accelerates the development. People think, it accelerates lung development. It does. It also accelerates all organ development.
Wow.
Because it's stress. So there are times when purposeful stress is intended. Now, EMDR therapy, I would not say is actually an example of inducing purposeful stress. I would actually say stress is actually continuous in somebody who's suffering.
Yes.
Somebody who's coming in, they're already suffering. And yes, very often phase 2 work is magical in and of itself. Absolutely. And we always I always tell my students, you start EMDR with phase 1. Like phases 1 and 2, right? Yes. So it's not like you're going to jump in feet first in phase 3 and start your processing. Like, you're doing the prep work because you got to know what's there. Yes. You got to know what's there in terms of adaptive information, what's the maladaptive or linked information. You need to know that stuff. So we're going to do that work, but we also know that there are lots of times when what's going to bring the real relief is the reprocessing.
I have to pause this conversation, Mara, because I think I'm noticing the dimensions with you that we're not just talking about pregnancy and EMDR. We're talking about, I think, even a bigger fear that clinicians hold of, I'm afraid to go into phase 4 because I don't want to hurt someone. What if they have an abreaction or leave that window of tolerance? And so I'm appreciating this conversation from that perspective and also kind of the pregnancy and EMDR perspective at the same time.
Yeah, no, I thanks for saying that, because I also see that a lot in training and consultation, where there's a real fear that this is going to do harm. And I have really started to wonder kind of when people are leaving training, what the beliefs are about what we're doing to the nervous system with EMDR therapy. Like it concerns me.
Yeah.
That people think, I mean, we know that EMDR reprocessing, that all of EMDR therapy is powerful.
Yes.
And I wonder if there is this implicit linkage of powerful with dangerous.
I think that's right.
And so again, when people are practicing under our protocol, and I must say, I'm not a protocol sort. That is not my style, which is one of the reasons why I avoided getting trained in EMDR almost 20 years ago. But our protocol is a framework.
Yeah.
And it works, and it gives us also tremendous flexibility within the framework. I just want to say that.
Oh yeah. Well, even Francine wrote, right, that the framework of EMDR is meant to be flexible. Like it's meant to help us think about how to work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we need to think about how to work. But I find standard protocol is, 90+% of the time we're using standard protocol.
Yep.
And then sometimes some modifications, but we don't need protocol for everything. We need to know how to conceptualize. That's a little bit of a tangent.
You're speaking my language, Mara. Yes, that's right.
Kind of conversation. But really, ultimately, the fear that this method is going to do harm to people, really, I see people avoiding. I also see people avoiding starting reprocessing. And I also think that it has something to do with whether people are doing a solid phase 2. Do they feel like they understand how to help people ground, how to help people reorient, co-regulation? There's all kinds of resources that we can pull in, attachment figures, all the things.
Yes.
And the relationship, the therapy relationship.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. How many times have people sat in a room with talk therapy and the client has gotten very upset? You've got skills.
So I love what you're saying, because I think what I want people to hear is that we're talking about the clinician's relationship with the power of EMDR.
Oh, I love how you said that.
Right? We're talking about our relationship and our comfort level with the power that we have. And obviously that's going to be, our own fear is going to be informed by potential misinformation from different trainings. And, people like me who last year was giving people information that was given to me without understanding the why, right?
Yeah.
But also so much is going to be informed by our own history of how we are in relationship with powerful anything, right?
Absolutely. And I will add to that, probably the journey that one takes and the models that we're attracted to serve to help us self-regulate. So I will share that when the first training, couples therapy training track that I took and completed was the Gottman model, cool. Which is a fantastic model. It's very, very cognitive. I am a self-psychologist, just to be clear. Okay? I'm a relational, developmental, attachment-focused therapist. But oh my God, those couples in my office scared the daylight out of me. And I needed something that was going to say, I'm going to interrupt you right now. And that's what you did, right? By the time I sent my tapes off for certification, I was signed up for EFT training, which is emotion-focused couples therapy, which is all about attachment. And I can remember sitting in the first phase of training, watching video when somebody is flooding, and I was sitting there like, why aren't you interrupting? You got to interrupt. But it's, again, you gain the comfort, and I'm comfortable with emotion. I was very comfortable with intense emotion, certainly with individuals. I saw kids, that I'm not comfortable with emotion, but with couples, because it can escalate so fast. It's like conflagration can happen very quickly.
That's right.
With some couples. So I wanted, give me that, that very structured approach. And then with time and with experience and with consultation and all the things, I found like this is great if couples are securely attached. It doesn't work so well if couples aren't securely attached. Got to do other things. Yeah. So I wonder also if people coming into EMDR, where the models that they're comfortable operating out of say, oh, emotion needs to be contained.
Thank you for saying that. I think that really beautifully summarizes a lot of the fear people have, right? With not just using EMDR and keeping, like I had a consultee say to me, and I know you've heard this, right? Well, I want to make sure they stay in their window of tolerance, right? Instead of kind of like, how do we just kind of notice if we're on the edge? And if we pop out, like that's not a bad thing.
And also crying, getting upset does not mean you're out of your window of tolerance.
But again, it's right. It's our relationship.
I might be as the clinician be out of my window of tolerance. Like, whose window of tolerance are we looking at here? And by the way, we have to take care of ourselves. I mean, we have to be providing support for clinicians as well, because we're working with trauma. Stuff is intense. I mean, I'm stating the obvious here.
Especially now. Yep.
Especially now. And I will add, in perinatal mental health, especially, it is not us and them. It is all us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all subject to sensitivities and awareness and, whoa, I know somebody, or maybe my parent or my sibling or my friend or me or my partner has experienced this thing. And, oh, wait, I'm feeling a thing. Mm. And so maybe there's this part of me that isn't ready to go there. Look, that's normal stuff. But as we discover that, recognizing, okay, here's where I get triggered. I need to work on this. And then, to whatever extent you can say, like, okay, maybe I'm not going to see this population right now. Like for me, I can't, and I am very aware of this. I know that I cannot tolerate seeing trauma in kids who are my kids' ages.
I had to stop working with littles when I had my twins. They're 5 now because it was too close. And I had to accept that and say, that's okay, because that's clinically responsible of me.
Yeah, well, because I knew that I would be that. I got a referral when my son was about 2. My daughters were about, so they would have been about 5, about your twins' ages. And it was a terrible death of a 2-year-old in an accident in the home. It was a home accident. And I didn't even have to think. It was, nope. Mm-mm. And I was brand new private practitioner. I was like, absolutely not. Yep. And I know it. And now that my kids are, in their early 20s, I'm very aware when I hear about traumas or something happens in a community I'm living in, and I'm thinking they're going to call me, and I'm like, I can't do it.
Yes,
I can't do it. And I've done, and I just know that for me, the vulnerability around that it's just intense. And I can do a lot of EMDR, and I have, and I can also say, I don't want to.
And that permission is something I hope people can hear as well, right?
I hope so too.
Across so many different content areas. This is, I love that we're having this conversation and we're doing it within this clinical reasoning framework that allows us to really look at other content areas related to our work with EMDR. I think that's just such a cool flow of the discussion.
Yeah.
And I think, we've talked about kind of like what people think when it comes to pregnancy and EMDR. We've talked about, kind of what people are getting wrong, what I've gotten wrong, why people are feeling scared. Mm-hmm. And I guess my question now is, if someone's listening to this or someone's having a client come in who's pregnant and they're noticing their relationship with this powerful modality and they're noticing their fear, what do you recommend happens next? Like if you had to walk someone through the process of, okay, now what do I do besides posting in a Facebook group? Like, what's that process?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question. So here's how I would zoom out and look at it and think about it. So first and foremost, EMDR starts with phase 1. So we're pregnant or not pregnant, we have still the same responsibility to do our assessment, to evaluate also what's the state of the resourcing, to do a good solid phase 2, and to assess readiness or preparation is the word I prefer for moving into reprocessing. So that process is going to happen regardless. So what I will say is, so pregnancy is not a rule out for any phase of EMDR therapy. No trimester, no part of pregnancy is an automatic rule out. That said, we still have to practice properly, intentionally, right? Taking care of the things we need to take care of. So the client who last week, we finished. We're never done with phase 2. We're always doing phase 2, basically. Phase 2 is forever and phase 1 is forever. So, but like phase 2 is solid. We have an idea, we know what we're going to start with in terms of target selection. We've done a good phase 1. We're agreed next week we're going to start reprocessing. They walk in the door and they say, I just need to tell you, I've been dying to tell you for weeks, I'm pregnant.
I'm laughing because this has happened to me
all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not good. I feel good. I had some nausea, but now I'm in, 15 weeks. I'm great. That client who was adequately prepared last week for EMDR is no less prepared today,
right.
Because now I know they're pregnant.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay. Now, the client with complex trauma or just a lot of stuff that's happening, who's needing a lot of phase 2 work, who comes in and says they're pregnant, that does not mean we now jump into reprocessing. We still do our phase 2 work because that's what the client is needing in terms of their EMDR journey. Like that's where we're at. When the time comes, when the preparation is where it needs to be, then you look at moving into reprocessing.
Beautiful. I love what I'm hearing, and I want folks to hear is pregnancy is not a rule out.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so I think that's just the one thing people I see just getting wrong. And so if nothing else, I hope people take that away with them today. And I think that maybe people hearing more stories of why this is important and how it can be successful can help them have those narratives to pull from when they get scared. Like I was working with a client without being too identifying too much, but basically we were working together when she just got pregnant virtually and working basically now she's about to have her baby, but her first pregnancy didn't go well after. And so we were processing all of that while she was pregnant with her second one. And I have to tell you, like, we just graduated her and she's all, sitting here with this belly and she's like, I'm so glad we did this because I already can feel my body's different. Yes. And I can already feel the sense of like, when this baby is born, it's not going to be what it was before.
Exactly. And this work is primary prevention. This is critically important for the pregnant person, birthing person, for this baby or babies. It sets them up for a better postpartum, for better development, for better attunement.
Yes.
And attachment. There's just so much benefit to doing this.
Yes.
Right. So I'm reminded as we're talking about the fears people have, I just want to say sometimes what I will hear from people also are things like, but what if it's a high risk pregnancy? And my response to that is, what kind of high risk?
Yes.
Because not all high risk pregnancy is the same. It doesn't mean anything on its face. So you and I had high risk pregnancies because we were pregnant with twins.
And I was geriatric.
Oh yeah, right. Well, I'll tell you later how they get to that number. Why 35 is suddenly you're old. That is a different physiologic situation. It's a different hormonal. What's going on in the HPA axis is entirely different. It's neurobiologically different than somebody with preeclampsia turning into HELP syndrome in a darkened room in the hospital where you don't breathe too loud because they could have a stroke. So like we will use our common sense here, right? This is but Mara, you said that EMDR, that pregnancy isn't a rule out. Yeah, that HELP syndrome, maybe HELP syndrome, we could say we're thinking, think about why, right? What are we saying here? Now, a client might benefit if they know how to do the butterfly tap. They might benefit from self-administered or loving hands administering soft, soothing, slow tapping. But that's a game time decision, I would say.
You are so knowledgeable. I appreciate you explaining this to us. I'm learning as you're speaking. And I think that when we go into the field of being a therapist, but especially EMDR therapist, there's like this pressure, like, oh my gosh, now I've got to learn about pregnancy and IFS, and I've got to learn attachment. And it's like, we get overwhelmed, I think, especially coming out of basic training, and we could get on this like training hamster wheel where we're like, no, I have to learn this. I have to be safe. Same. My question to you is, what is your advice for people who, let's say they're coming out of basic, or maybe they're just getting certified, who feel like they understand EMDR, but they aren't expert or specialized like you are? What would be your advice for them? Is it just always best to get consultation about these
cases? You're talking about if they're getting into, because EMDR and pregnancy is like one slice of talking about EMDR in EMDR and perinatal mental health, which is vast and deep and amazing. And I just have to say, if you think that you don't treat this population, I will suggest to you that you look around your caseload and your history and think, because somebody who you're seeing individually could come in to you and say, guess what, I'm pregnant, or I just had a miscarriage, or I've had this happen more times than I can count with couples where I'm getting their whole history. And then down the line, oh, by the way, we had a stillborn baby 15 years ago, which is when all the conflict started. So you never know. Or there was a terrible postpartum depression in the now 10-year-old.
Or even people like I want to own, I didn't even believe this was a real thing, but I have had clients who've come in and we're processing their birth trauma. We're processing like them in the womb. Yes. And I wasn't able to believe that till I'm seeing it real for them and shifting.
Well, the body remembers. The body doesn't lie. So what gets experienced by the body is going to be held in the body. So it's all pre-verbal.
Yep.
So whatever is getting accessed, if we're seeing activation, right? And then we're starting to see movement. We're seeing movement.
Yep.
It's bringing relief. It's bringing relief. So it's vast and deep. And so when I opened a special interest group for EMDR and perinatal mental health in 2019. And on the application, it says, who is this for? Like, which group of therapists? And I put in all caps, everybody, welcome, come. It's a big tent.
It applies to everything. Yeah.
Everybody. And it's funny because I've had in my training groups, people who said, I haven't knowingly seen so many clients with perinatal mental health, but my own mother had this and this and this and this. And I'm very aware of. That's really powerful.
All around us.
All around us. And we see this all the time. And we were talking before we started recording about these images coming out of Ukraine right now. The NICU babies who are being bagged because there's no power, and they're also not in the hospital. There's some are in the hospital without power. And these mothers birthing, these pregnant people birthing in bomb shelters or in makeshift bomb shelters. And what is that? What is the repercussion for all of these things that are happening?
Yes.
And just the amount of trauma in that environment right now. And these babies, these little kids.
And thank you for bringing that into the recording, because we were talking about it, and I know we've all seen those images and we're so impacted, especially if we have our own children. It's like we feel that in our body. And as you were just talking about those images, I had this overwhelming feeling of like, those images make it so clear. Like if I was there, I would. It's like, of course I would give this person EMDR. Of course I would. And I think that having that extreme scene, I think might actually, even though it's horrific, help us here at home where we're safe have more courage to respond to people that we might feel hesitant to help.
Yes. Yes.
So it's clear.
Yes. It's clarifying. And I think of all of this work that we do as helping to build better shock absorption for people. And so certainly when you see those raw images, like you said, it's so evident. Of course, I mean, how could you not put insulation in there? How could you not, but of course, again, the fear, we don't want to make anything worse. And so I just want to say again, I understand why people say, trainers and consultants and clinicians say, I'd better not, I'd rather not. And some of it, I think, actually will, for some people, have to do with how skilled they feel in EMDR, if they're not sure. And so then get consultation. There's training in perinatal mental health that I really encourage people to take. There are trainings on EMDR and perinatal mental health right now that I'm the trainer for, but I just want you to know that I'm working very hard with a team to build a perinatal training track for treating disruption in the perinatal period. And I use the word disruption intentionally because there are, as we all know, there are lots of kinds of experiences that can impact the nervous system in a way that traumatizes it.
Yes.
And I want to make it clear that we treat the impact. We don't have to decide whether we think the thing that made the impact counts. So if my windshield is cracked, I don't look and say, well, those pebbles were too small to do that. I look at my windshield. Windshield does not lie to me. It's cracked. I got to take care of it.
Yes.
Right. So I'm working with a team of people to bring in other people with expertise, with deeper expertise than I have in certain areas. Infertility, adoption.
Yes.
Couples in the perinatal period, complex trauma and attachment in perinatal period. So there's so many subspecialty areas. And so where I'm putting myself is to say, like, hey, I got your back. I want to support you in doing it. I want to invite you in to say, hey, how can we help? Yeah. I've done this for a while. I kind of know how to think about doing it, but you bring in your ways. You want to do it differently, do it differently. So we're working to create this training program. No certification, just like a certificate, but to say, like, hey, I've really gone deep, and also I want to learn this stuff. Yes. And I want to learn from people who really understand how to integrate, these different pieces. Like a clinician who's certified in EFT and also EMDR and a consultant, right? Put it together. Like, let's talk about how we would do this work, and what about in the perinatal period. So all the things.
I'm sitting here. I know I just met you. I'm just appreciating you so much. And we'll put it in show notes, like how people can get in touch with you if they want to work with you for consultation or if they want to come into your program. I'm very happy to hear that you're thinking about how to expand access to this information, whether it's because we're just one person, right? But for you to be able to.
And I don't know all the things. Like I'm looking forward to taking many of the courses as well that are going to be offered by my colleagues.
Yes.
Right. And I want to encourage them to take what they know and turn it into something accessible as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be really great. It's going to be super fun.
I love the legacy that you're creating. I love that you're thinking. I love that you took something that happened to you, that you made meaning of it. You turned it into your life's work because you can see how important it is and how connected it is to everything. I love that you're already thinking about how to make that accessible to lots and lots of people who obviously, myself included, need to learn more about this. And I love the permission and clarity you offered today for people about maybe things we're hearing that aren't accurate or informed or missing the why.
Yeah.
And I want to ask a question before we end today. I love having consultees or colleagues around me who do what you did, right? Which is to see that there's this thing happening. We don't fully know about it yet, or no one's talking about this in the way they should be yet. Let's bring it to the platform and let's talk about it and learn about it together because it's important. And so that makes us a leader, right? In the EMDR field, that makes you a thought leader. It makes you a clinical leader. And so if there are people listening to this who are noticing in their own work or their own personal lives a content area that doesn't feel like it's getting the right amount of attention or consideration, do you have any advice for people that are having that experience that you had however many years ago?
Yeah. To how to get that mobilized? Yeah, I do. So the first thing is look for your people, people who understand, to get support for yourself. My journey started with my own support for myself as a parent of preemies. And from there, the person I am as a clinician and a therapist, and the person I am as a parent and mom to preemies started to move closer together and interconnect. Ask for advice from people whose work you want to emulate. That's how I met Debbie Davis. I found her book and I read it and I was like, this is it. It's not flinching. It's interviewing parents. It's incredible. And through a whole series of events that were like, oh my God, how did this actually happen? I called her and I said, how did you get a publisher to publish this?
Yeah.
Because it's so intense. And we've talked. So we're now doing we wrote 2 books together. We've done 1 million conferences together. We wrote a book chapter together. And now we're doing another workshop together in May on perinatal bereavement. We're still 25 years later.
You found your person.
I found what, but I wasn't looking to see if I could collaborate with her. I was like, what can you share about your experience? Can you give me advice about how to do it? And then once you start to do the work and share what you know, this is really important. And Debbie and I found this all the way through our writing of the book. We wrote content and gave it away.
Yes.
Be generous.
Yes.
Just be generous. Nobody is going to do what you do the way that you do it. And so even when there are other people talking about a topic and maybe you don't love the way they're talking about it or you have something to add, it's okay because people are talking about it. You join the conversation with generosity, with curiosity, and then all boats rise. Right?
Yes.
So we give it away and you value yourself.
Yes.
So it's this balance and find your people and have a group of people you're like, what do you think? It's not like there's a single, this is it and how you do it. There's always wiggle room about, listen, I think I should get paid for this versus I can give this away.
Yes.
We all do this. We all struggle around this. But if you can find your people, whether they're in terms of how you think about things or also content specific, but all of it, find your people, find your mentors, start to talk about what you love. If you do what you love, all things will come because you're going to learn what you love and you're going to realize what you need to learn, but also what you can share. It all starts to become clearer when you're in relationship with people. You can't do it alone inside your head. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. You can't do it all that talking. You can't do it alone inside your head.
We need each other. Yes.
We need each other.
Well, and I think what I can feel through the screen from you is that, you're kind of blending this personal part and this professional part. And I think there is something very powerful that happens when you have that integration in yourself and you just have this space to be authentic and use your voice to say hey, this is going on. Let's be curious about it in the framework that I'm coming from. So I appreciate that. I'm excited to be in the EMDR community. I'm excited to see all of this just explosion of ideas and different content areas. And it's just a clinically fascinating place to get to work and be a part of. And I'm, again, so grateful to all of your generosity with your information for us in our Facebook groups and talking with me here today.
My pleasure. And, I really also appreciate and admire all that you're doing in the same way. And it's so great to talk. Great to talk with you. Such great questions.
Great. Well, we would love to have you love to have you back on. Maybe we can do a follow-up and see if you have any questions. Maybe we can do a little Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to do that.
Thank you so much. I want to again thank Mara Tessler-Stein for hanging out with us today and being, like she says, so generous with all the things that she has lived through and learned and integrated. It really is a beautiful legacy as a teacher and thought leader to leave a wealth of information and to give learners a relationship with that content. And Mara has a gift for that, which I deeply respect. So thank you so much, Mara, for hanging out with me and meeting me virtually. And I hope this has been helpful for all of you who are watching or listening. If you are interested in getting to know more about what Mara is up to, you can find out information about how to contact her in the show notes. And if you're somebody who is jiving with this message of, being a thought leader or developing new content in a clinical area or meaning making of your own experience and giving that back and to clients and the community you're a part of, I would invite you, if you're not already, to join us here at Zero Disturbance. We have an incredible welcome bundle free resource for you guys. It's just this combination of resources about intensives, passive income, EMDR informed clinical reasoning and creativity and resourcing. And it's really just a bundle of all my favorite resources that I've been sharing over the past several years with all of you. So make sure you grab that in the link below. And until next time, y'all, please stay safe, healthy, be kind to each other. The world needs so much of your kindness right now. And I will look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.